Emma Webber, thank you first off so much for joining us. You must have had a pretty exhausting day dealing with all the inquiries about this new report from the Care Quality Commission. That's the official health regulator that has come out into the horrific events of last summer. The CQC report talked about a series of errors, omissions and misjudgments. Just to start as Emma, there's so much to talk about that we're going to go through in the next half hour or so. But just give us initially your response to seeing that report.
Well, as families, we did have the courtesy from the CQC of meeting with them a few weeks ago. They were waiting for the government thing to happen to see who the health secretary would be, so they could present it to the health secretary. So we sat with them for a few hours and went through it. It made the doctors in the room cry. Well, it made all of us cry, but I think that they saw the failings, firsthand, and they understand what it's like. I work for the NHS, but I'm not clinical or medical in any way, and that was tough. And that was really tough, and we've had time to try and digest it, and we knew and we were braced and ready for it. But I think there's something about it when it goes public, and today there's been another, for our family, we call them news blackout days, where I'm up here in London. My husband David is at home with Charlie, Barney's younger brother, and I don't want them seeing the headlines. You don't. Yesterday we were driving, and we thought, okay, Dave, you'll get your way. You can listen to Talk Sport, because I knew all the Panorama stuff was happening yesterday, and even on Talk Sport, it was headlines yesterday. I know it is again today, and there's something about it. I think it hammers home, because then everybody knows. And everybody realises, and everyone has an opinion, but at the heart of it, it's just devastating, isn't it? It's just catastrophic failures.
Given that you are a campaigner, I guess you're happy for people to know and to be talking about it.
Mm.
Is there any part of you which sometimes doesn't want it to be a public conversation, that would rather it was a private matter?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there are times when I'm in Marks and Spencer's or somewhere and you think, people recognise you, people come up to you, and randomly a lady brought me a bunch of flowers the other day, and you think, God, there's some good people out there. But I think whether we chose to engage or not, it's going to be out there.
Yeah.
And so we're 14 months into this horror. We're used to it now. And I think the one thing I do have a background in, I've got sort of any level of expertise in it, is a bit of media and comms and working with the media. So we understand the value and the power.
You are
that.
incredibly polished and eloquent in your media performances. I've been really impressed by that, and sometimes I'm amazed you don't just burst into tears, because I will sometimes burst into tears thinking about this sort of thing by myself. But your composure has been remarkable.
Yeah, I think there are coping mechanisms when you've spent years working, normally your side of I would say camera, but mics today, because I hope it doesn't come across as too polished, because it's weird. I do have an experience, I do have a background, but I'm normally the person behind the scenes. I'm not normally the person speaking. I'm normally the person writing the press release or creating the narrative. But in this, it's strange. I have this clarity of mind.
Right.
And that's the only way I can describe it, like I've never had before. So when it comes to this, I'm mostly, forgive me if I'm not today because it's been a long day, but mostly razor sharp, and I can answer. And I feel, I just said to somebody a little while ago, and they asked me a very sort of similar question. And I said that because I'm telling my truth, and I know that we, all of the families have nothing to hide or embellish or defend, then we've taken the decision to speak openly and candidly. And I think that's probably how we do it. But okay. Trust me, that when the days are bad, they're really bad. When you can't look at photographs, when you go and, Sinead says this, and when you go, she opens her window, she told me in the morning, and there's a picture of Grace in primary school, and she averts her eyes, and it's not because it's actually because of the love she can't look at her, and I'm very much the same. I find it difficult. So Now I'm going to tear up a bit, but it's there and it's raw. But I feel like I have and want to do this for him and for Charlie to call out all these wrongs, because there are so many of them.
Can we address some of those wrongs in some detail? The report, one thing that really shocked those of us who read it is the sheer number of times that Valdo Calocane was seen by a doctor, treatment was recommended, and then he walked away. Some people have said that this proves the need for more assertive intervention, that maybe he should have been compelled to receive this treatment. Do you think that's a fair reading of the report?
Yes, I think it's a fair. It's a fair summary. The CQC report has a great level of detail, and I do believe it's a thorough report. The NHS England independent homicide report comes out in a month or so, and I think that will go into even greater detail. But it's a difficult balance. I think I would call it more sort of assertive support.
Right.
Rather than management. It's evident in this case there are so many failures where this is an individual that was so dangerous and so violent. He'd been sectioned 4 times. And of those 4 sectionings, 2 of them weren't even at the right appropriate level where they could give depot medication, which is when medication is effectively forced upon someone. I understand deprivation of liberty. I understand the concept. I'm a great believer in supporting mental health in the community, but actually public safety has to come first. And look at what happened here. Had he been forced to receive that medication, had the doctors, the clinicians treating him done their jobs properly or a little bit deeper, then they would have realised the risk that there was. And it wasn't even a risk just to himself. This is a real risk to society. And it was always going to happen, wasn't it?
What do you put that down to, the fact that presumably there's no allegation of malevolent behaviour or deliberate making of mistakes? I just wondered what you put it down to. Is there a cultural issue here around who are they really thinking about when they are treating people like Valdo Calocane? Are they really thinking about the danger that he may pose to the public, or are they thinking too much about him? I suppose to put it quite sort of brutally, that this idea of the rights for him could be said, and some have said, trump the rights of the people who need to be kept safe in this horrific incident, your own son.
My son, yeah, exactly. I think it's something that has carried through into the judicial process. As victims, you're an afterthought at best, despite what it says on the government website. You're not at the heart of everything that's done. I've just written it down so I don't forget the words, but patient-centred, that's right and that is appropriate. But there's the right to human life, which has to take priority. And if somebody's a risk, then whatever is needed to keep society and innocent people safe has to be done. I would use the words gross negligence. They're not doing it maliciously or deliberately. I would put a question to particularly the medical professional that discharged him in late 2022 because he hadn't turned up for 2 appointments. I do believe that they were even sending letters to the wrong address, so there wasn't even the duty of care there to check that they had the right address for him. I would put it to this person that if that person that you're about to discharge, if you knew the next individual they would come across would be your son or your daughter, would you have done the same thing? And I think that's all I can answer in that regard, because they didn't do the full risk assessment. Anybody, I'm Sinead and Sandra, Grace's mum and dad are doctors, they're professionals, they understand this, and Sandra himself has worked as an FME for the Met Police for 20 years, and he's got an MBE because of it. He speaks with proper knowledge, much more than me. I just speak as a mum, and I just speak as a hopefully relatively intelligent human being who do questions how that could possibly have happened.
Do you feel they've been held to account? Because one of the big issues, Tim and I and Camilla and I have covered so many of these reports about NHS failings, whether it's the infected blood scandal, whether it's the maternity services, and every time they go through the mistakes, the litany of errors, as you say, Emma, gross negligence, but nobody seems to be held to account individually for what has happened. Do you feel that people have been held to account in this case in any sense?
I would say not yet, and not yet being the operative words, because I think that's one of the key things that has to change. I understand that people make mistakes. I understand that there are training needs, and it's not a witch hunt. However, if you are a senior decision maker in any company, in any organisation, but particularly when health and people's lives are at risk, then if you get it so badly wrong, you must bear that burden upon your careerness. If necessary, if you lose your job, you lose your job. It's unlikely that would happen all the time, but I think it would expose people that are not doing their jobs properly. I would say, of course, it's very difficult, very challenging to have your career stalled or sidelined or even sacked, but it's not as catastrophic as having your son murdered.
No, of course. I mean, do you think that there perhaps is operating in parts of the NHS a culture of optimism when it comes to dangerously mentally ill people, a sense of a faith in their ability to be cured, which is actually unrealistic?
I don't have enough knowledge about what else has happened, in other cases. But I think it's evident in this one. Is it optimism or is it inability to do their jobs properly? I don't know. But whatever happens, there has to be much stricter regimes and rules put in place. I give an example of how many times over the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years have we heard, like you said, in-depth investigations into failing agencies, be it the NHS, be it the police forces, and you have the inevitable, we sent an unreserved apology for our failures to XYZ, devastated family, and lessons will be learnt. Well, actually, they're not, are they? Because how many times are they saying that? So something has to change now, and accountability has to be part of it, organisational and individual accountability, not a witch hunt, but there has to be. I think if you are a chief constable, if you're a senior investigating officer, and you make bad decisions, poor decisions that have a huge impact on the outcome, then you have to take accountability and responsibility for that, whatever that might be.
Do you feel the new health secretary, I think you've met obviously Wes Streeting, the new health secretary, who has made good on the promise that there will be a public inquiry, judge-led, I hope and assume. Do you feel that he gets that need for change to actually make sure that these reports finally start making a difference?
I like to be optimistic because we've got a new government. I had the opportunity to meet Wes Streeting when he was in opposition. We met with Wes last Tuesday, and I hope that's not too familiar to call him Wes, but I always get confused with the Secretary of State for Health. So we met with him and his team last Tuesday, but we also met with Richard Hermer, who's the new Attorney General. And it was actually Richard that told us, first and foremost, in a very sort of Labour way, I've heard from the boss, and the boss says, we will commit, as we promised, to a public inquiry, which is great, and we're glad to hear that. I can't say I'm thrilled or delighted because that doesn't enter my vocabulary anymore, but I'm glad to hear that, as were the other families. But what we must ensure, and he did say, to be fair, details to be decided, we must ensure that it's statutory and that it's judge-led, because we're talking about the NHS today, but the failings in this are colossal. The Care Quality Commission, the Section 48 that's being discussed widely today, that is actually, and I don't know if this is public knowledge as such, but that's actually the first time that has ever been done, an urgent Section 48 on an individual patient. It's normally done on a hospital, on a trust, on a care home, that type of thing. So I think that's really important to make that comment, that at this level of detail, this is the first time it's had to be done, and look at what it's uncovered. The others that are happening are a bit mind blowing, and it's easy to fall into an acronyms. And a year ago, I'd be Googling, I had no idea what half of these meant, but the Crown Prosecution Service, there was an alleged independent review by His Majesty's CPSI, and that's the inspectorate for the CPS. We were very disappointed, wholly let down by that one. It felt like marking homework to us.
And that was about the charges that...
That was just about the handling of the
Calocane...
CPS with us.
Oh, right, okay, not the
Yeah.
charges issue, but the actual handling of the case.
Well, it's a bit of everything, but it's
Yep.
largely the way the CPS dealt with stuff and decisions that they made. And you know what you get here is an example, and I won't go on for too long. But when we question what did the Crown Prosecution Service do during this investigation, what did the police do? Because we have a very big issue with the fact that they never bothered to take toxicology, even though they declined to have intimate samples. They didn't bother to do even the basic non-intimate ones. So why? How could you not possibly think that this individual needed to be tested for drugs and alcohol? And so what we were trying to ask was, what guidance did the CPS give the police? And none of that came back. It was just not answered. What we had was the SIO, who was a senior investigating officer, had a toxicology strategy. That's not an investigation. That's not thorough. That's one example. I won't go into all of the others. The two police forces, there are 2, 3, 4, 5, I think, separate investigations, one into Leicestershire Police Force and the other into Nottinghamshire, and that's by the Independent Office for Police Conduct. I always say complaints, but it's conduct. We're struggling with that one because we are yet 14 months on, and since we first met them in March, yet to agree the proper terms of reference. They believe that they've got the terms of reference, but we don't, because there's very, very vital things that aren't on the terms, and if they're not being investigated, nothing can be answered. And then there's the College of Policing, who is more of a learning sort of educational sort of learning for the police and best practice. That's been paused at the moment because we need to go with the one that the IOPC, the independent office, are doing. So that's just an example, and that's not even going into what the NHS has been doing, their internal review and their external independent one. So it's bewildering and it's mind-blowing, and it's becoming obvious that there are silos, there are cracks, I can't tell you how many times we've been told, well, that's not in our remit. Okay, so it's not in their remit either, so who's going to answer that question? Who's going to answer why did the toxicology not be taken? This is somebody taken into custody and held for 5 days with no mental health assessment. This is somebody who didn't receive any treatment until September. However, this is somebody that was presented to us on the 23rd of November, was the first we heard of it, that wouldn't be standing charges for murder, as we've been told all along. It would be manslaughter. So these are the questions that we are having to ask as families. So therefore, we have to call and we have to ensure that the public inquiry is a full and proper one, where those who take the stand, if that's the right terminology, are compelled to tell the truth and the answers. And then there's the overall holistic outcome, and from that it's not a witch hunt and finger pointing. There should be accountability for people that did wrong and organisations that did wrong, but that, I believe, is where we will see laws change and systems properly improve. Because the independent ones, they won't all. It's mind-boggling what we have to go through, and the amount of meetings we've sat in is ridiculous.
I guess journalism plays a role in the scrutiny of the system, and the BBC Panorama programme has made a programme in which it spoke to the Calocane family and talked about their experience of the mental health, etc., and all the mistakes that were made. How did you feel when Panorama reached out to you and told you they were making this documentary?
Again, the key word is told us. They had made the documentary.
Right.
It was just 2 weeks ago, I believe. Is that right?
Well, it's the 26th of July, so what's that, just 2 and a bit weeks before going to air. And I received the phone call and then ensured that the journalist Nav then called the Kumars and the Copes straight afterwards. And I was told, Emma, we've been working on this really in-depth investigative piece of journalism for months. No stone has been left unturned, and some of the big questions that you've raised about Calocane are going to be answered. I can always remember this verbatim. And there are people talking on camera for the very first time, including the Calocane family. And that's the moment where the sort of your instinct rings, okay, bear in mind, this is the end of July, and I was told that it had been done, and it was actually with legals, is the word I had been told. And I asked I said, please can I ask why we've not been told of this before, what the decision is, why the decision seems to have been made not to include us in any part of this, or at least confer with us or give us a little bit earlier prior knowledge and more detail. And I was told that we had taken part in a big cases long-form news piece in January, and effectively we had our say then, and this was in the public interest that they produce this documentary and air it. And they wouldn't say what it was. The people that haven't spoken before, because we've got so many concerns about so much, his contact with others, the rumour that's persistent that he was a drug taker, what he was up to when he was up in London, the people that he was with when he was up in London. There's so much. We didn't know who was going to be popping up, being the before unheard people. We didn't know that it was solely related to his mental health. Well, we already knew the outcome of the CQC report, and whilst the Panorama programme did expose a lot, it's nothing that isn't in, really, the CQC report in depth or in what is going to be the NHS Independent.
Do you think you might have contributed had the BBC asked you?
Absolutely. There were inaccuracies we could have, if they'd fact-checked with us. And it might, to some people, might not seem as important, but they stated that the families asked for the unduly lenient sentence review. We didn't. We never asked for that. That was the Attorney General. We were dragged through hell having to attend that and seeing him again and being told, no, based on the evidence, this is the appropriate sentencing. So yes, but we've been asking and so concerned about the evidence. So our point wasn't the unduly lenient sentence. It's about everything before that needs unravelling. So that's wrong. Right. There are things that should have been asked of that family, I believe, that weren't. There were omissions. And I don't want to come across as vitriolic towards the Calocane family, but I have no forgiveness, I have no compassion for them, because they've taken everything. They've taken the most precious thing from us. But neither do I want to start a witch hunt for them. I just feel that the approach of the BBC was one-sided, and had we had an opportunity to at least have input, even if we didn't partake in the programme, it would have been better duty of care and editorial policy on the BBC's part. So as soon as we had that concern, our legal team spoke to them, they were dismissed, and then I emailed the editor, got nothing. I emailed again, and finally got a response, effectively dismissing, saying they'd taken the utmost care and sensitivities in the families and given us advice. They hadn't told us what was going to be in it. But I don't want to dwell on Panorama too much, but I think it goes to show that there are times where the media don't help.
Right.
Because there's an awful lot more that needs to be uncovered. And had they spoken to us, we could have contributed. And the last insult really is, well, Wes Streeting asked them, spoke to the Director General, and I believe got dismissed and didn't have a response. That's what we were told from Wes Streeting's office. And I think Wes Streeting himself, actually, he emailed me yesterday saying, I'm so sorry I couldn't help more, and I hope that it doesn't cause you too much distress. But we asked for at least a disclaimer to go on the end of the programme to say that the families of Gracine and Barney have not been involved in the making of this programme. They didn't even do that. And I just find that dismissive. But what's done's done, right? We've got other things we have to focus on.
Yeah.
On the whole, investigative journalism, broadcast journalism is essential, and I'm all for that, because a lot of the stuff that we've put forward and are realising is because of the hard work of the great journalists that are out there. And we've had loads of support. I'm grateful for you inviting me in today. I'm hardly your cheeriest guest. But yeah, it does present challenges as well. That's just one example. But
do you think there's a... Sorry,
go
on. On that, do you think there's a tension between presenting Calocane as a sick man versus presenting Calocane as a culpable man? And that maybe some people are minded to see him as sick rather than
I
guilty.
Think what they produced wasn't balanced enough, because we have evidence of what we believe is his insight and his ability to make judgments.
Yeah.
We know from our meeting with the Nottingham Mental Health Trust of last week that despite what the prosecution doctor said, he was not in psychosis for 2 years. He managed to complete his 2:1 degree from Nottingham University in mechanical engineering a year before he murdered my son, who was at the same university. So this is somebody who stockpiled his weapons. This is somebody who chose who he was going to kill and not. I'm not saying he's not ill. We've never said that. But what we're saying is there's an element here of punishment that is essential, that's not happening. At the moment, he's a patient in a hospital and he receives all of his benefits. 87% of people on indefinite hospital orders are out within 10 years and 98% are out within 20 years. If you delve into the statistics of what actually happens with indefinite hospital orders, that bears no weight with me. I find it more of an insult. But what's really alarming is the word treatment resistant, and that's going to come up more and more. And in the CQC, it's covered in there. There was a great deal of sway during the sentencing hearing put upon the need for Calocane to go into a secure unit because he is treatment resistant. Therefore, if he were in a prison, the medication would not be appropriate. He would be at risk to the other prisoners and the staff. If he was in a secure unit, he would be given a different level of medication. I think it's clozapine or something like that it's called. It's all in the transcripts. It's all there and it will be uncovered. The actual truth, when you read the CQC report, is that he wasn't treatment resistant. He was resisting taking treatment.
Right.
So he stockpiled his medication. Sometimes he took it, and most of the time he didn't. And he hid it. He said he was taking it.
And I believe
he
lied
misled.
about whether or not he could hear voices
he
to get out of hospital early.
Of course he did. He misled. This is an intelligent man. He's not stupid. And the fact that he is now in that said secure unit, he's not on that next level of medication that was apparently essential. He's actually on his original medication, and it's working, and his violent tendencies have abated somewhat. So all of this stinks, and it's wrong, and it's unfair.
Given how much you know, Emma, how do you feel about what the BBC did in that panorama?
It's what they didn't do, I think, that is the key point there, because had they had the foresight and forethought to at least engage with us, then there's stuff we could have told them, and they chose not to. Bloody mindedness, I think. I'm so disappointed. But I don't want to enter into a battle or a war with BBC. Do you know what? I have to say this. BBC, particularly the breakfast teams and the regional teams, have been amazing. And I don't, I've had messages from people within those teams who are very sad to hear what's happened. I don't want to get them into trouble, but they're great. They're amazing journalists. They do a job. They care as well. And they get the story out, but they care too. The Panorama team, hugely disappointed with them, despite what they say. But we'll move on. Clearly won't be engaging with them again. I personally wouldn't, but it's done. A lot of what they've uncovered is out there, but it was always going to come out anyhow. And I think there is that very real risk of what we're trying to say about the culpability and the processes involved with Calocane during arrest, in custody, and leading up to the sentencing.
Emma, you've made it so clear that it's not about process in the end, is it? It's not about reports. It is about getting to the truth, but it is about your son.
Yeah.
It is about all the people who were murdered, the people who were injured, their families and their loved ones. You brought a beautiful picture in of your son there, which is so lovely to see.
How old is he in this
looks
picture?
like in his upper sixth or his sixth form uniform, is that? Or
yeah, he's lower sixth, near the end of that.
Yeah.
Mouth closed because he had his braces back on for not cleaning his teeth. But yeah, I used to go, oh, Barney, you look so beautiful when you smile. But I look at that now and I was, he is beautiful.
One reason why it's touched so many people is he was so handsome. That is a boy you want your daughter to bring home.
Yes, Sandra and Sinead.
I was saying to you, my son was in the year below him at Nottingham University, and I remember when he called me and said that he knew of your son and how well known and so appreciated in the university, particularly for my son. My son is very much into sport like your son is, and he was so well known as such a positive influence at the university. The fact that a year below, my son, who had no reason to know him, knew who he was.
That's
and told me that.
In a faculty of that size and student group of that
Isn't
size.
that amazing? Tell us a bit about
he's he's amazing. He was absolutely loving his life, and he was living his life. And I think the thing he loved the most in Nottingham were the friends, the social group, the drinking, the party, all the stuff you do in your first year at university. Then he loved his sport next, which also included all of those said friends. He absolutely adored the cricket. He was so, when he got into the cricket team, bless him, he phoned me and he was so happy, and it was so lovely to hear that. And then he quite liked his studies, but he never really talked about those. But I hope hopefully he would have gone. He should be going into his final year next month, and there's no point in talking about that. But yeah, he wasn't perfect. He wasn't the most academic. I always say this, and I say this to school without glaring at the headmaster, that in Barnaby's 16 years at Taunton School, he never once stood on the stage winning the big prize at prize giving or commemoration. He got full colours for sports, and he did that. He got Star of the Week once when he was in nursery. So that's an accolade with the certificate we've still got. But he was just really real. He made mistakes. He got things wrong. We often joke with his old housemaster in year 10 when he nicked a Kinder Hippo from the tuck shop. And then there was a whole CCTV incident, and he flatly refused to admit it because he didn't want to dob his friends in. But but I think it's painting the portrait of him as he's real, and he was having the time of his life. And he met someone. It's really interesting. Independently, the Kumars and us, we've heard that both those kids said to other people, "Oh no, actually, Barney said to me, sorry, Barney never spoke about girls. He was quite secretive." He was quite popular, but he was quite secretive. But he said to me in December, and I said to him, "Oh, where are you going tonight, Barnes?" Because he was coming home a couple of days later. And he said, "Oh, I'm going out with my best friend up here." And I said, "Oh, who's he?" And he went, "Actually, it's a she." I was like, "Oh, who's she?" And he said, "Well, I've said the story many times, and it makes me laugh every time." But he said, "Well, she's really lovely. She's a hockey player, and she's like really, really clever. And her parents are like really famous doctors." I was like, "Cheers, Barnes. I'm not, like hanging off a hedge. Thank you, mate." But he obviously made a really big impact. But what he then said was, "Mum, she's just like me." And one of their mutual friends at Nottingham told us and told the Kumars that Grace had said to him, "Oh, I really like Barney. We're really close. He's like a boy version of me." And they were aesthetically blessed. They're both beautiful kids. They have most amazing teeth. But I think that beauty's only so deep, isn't it? They never left anyone in a corner. They hated bullying. He was the first to judge sometimes and be on PC, normal teenage stuff. But the amount of letters that we've had, a bit like what your son has said at Nottingham, but also back in Taunton, where it's just the small kind things he did. Like a friend who was struggling with his mental health during year 13, and Barney would just sit on FaceTime with him, both moronically playing their PS5s or whatever they were doing, but not talking or engaging. But he was just there. He was just there for him. And the last, I won't because I could go on for hours, but this story did really make me laugh. And there was only one boy from Taunton School called Ollie who went to Nottingham with Barney. Ollie's super, super clever, went to do, I don't think he was doing physics and maths or something like that, but he was into quite alternative music, Ollie, but the two of them sort of clung on to each other quite a bit in the first few months. And I remember saying to Barney, "Where are you going tonight?" He said, "Oh God," he said, "I'm going to a punk gig." And I went, "Hang on, what?" He said, "I'm going to a punk gig with Ollie." I said, "Oh my God." He said, "Yeah, Ollie wants me to go and he hasn't got anyone to go with." And so I messaged him the next day and I said, how was your punk gig? And he went, "It was all right." I said, how was it? And he said, "Well, I just drank through it." But then when I spoke to Ollie about it, he told me, and he said, "You know what?" Barney went and he said, Barney came out of his room and said, "You can't wear that, Barney, you're going to get mugged, and you can't wear your watch." It was so funny. And it's just those little stories are the most important things. And on the back of this tragedy, there's some positive that people wanted to donate. People want to do something, don't they? And so we set up the Barnaby Webber Foundation, and there's one for Grace as well, for Grace's family, and that's serving to support young people with life challenges, which sounds a bit grandiose, but actually it's really not, because young people age 18 and under face all kinds of life challenges, and it can be physical, emotional, sexual, financial, social, and we want to be a bit like Barney and be able to support them, whether that's a club, a school, a charity, or an individual. And so far we've raised about 150,000 without really doing too much. And I'm just like, wow. And we're talking nice things about BBC. We've been working on a piece with them, which I think is going to air next week, if I'm not blacklisted. And it's our first donation that's coming out of that foundation, and it's for a wonderful young lady who was having the most awful life challenge with this illness, this condition, this skin condition that she's got. And I watched her on the news with Graham Souness, cried my eyes out, messaged one of the presenters, and it said, we want to do something. It just felt right, so we're going to do something for her, and I hope that'll come to fruition soon. And Charlie was involved in that, Barney's younger brother, and it helps him to see and be positive. And
on the institution side,
yeah.
Do you have hope that the shocking things that you have been through, obviously the grotesque death of your son Barnaby and of Grace and of Ian is one thing, but that the treatment that you've then faced, the missed opportunities for this not to happen, do you feel optimistic that through the work you're doing and the other relatives and families are doing, and some of the investigative authorities, this may never happen again, or do you just feel that's too much of an ocean to get over?
I think it's a stretch to say that tragedies won't happen again. But I would like to think that this awful voice that's been thrust upon us, and I say us because that's all the families that are united in this, is that it will serve some purpose. And you have to have hope, right? I said in my eulogy that our life, our world, our life as a family is like try to liken it so people might visually imagine it. It's like a dark sky with nothing. It's black. But the kindness and the good things that happen, because there is more good than bad out there, are those tiny glimmers of light that I think will turn into a star that will one day turn into the dawn that comes. And it might sound a bit optimistic, but you have to have hope. And I think if it's the last thing I do on this earth, it will be to evoke some change. Do you know what? If I could help one family, one person, by getting the support that victims get changed, by getting the law changed, by getting services and systems improved, then just one family, then I guess I've done my thing. And I've done it for him, but I've done it for Charlie and Dave, my husband, and Grace and Ian and their family, because we've got this crazy new family now with the Kumars and the Coateses, and we're intrinsically linked, but we're not just stuck together because we've been thrown in this maelstrom together. There's a real connection, and I genuinely feel a love and a respect for every single member of all of those families that we've met.
Emma, I think Barney, I think he'd be really proud.
Thank you.
Sorry. It's just very moving what you've said.
Oh,
very proud, Emma. I think that you've done so much, all of the families and all of the people connected with this aftermath of the horror you've been through has already achieved so much of what you've just said. We thank you so much from the bottom of Tim and my heart that you've come onto the Daily Tea, from all the team in the gallery. We've all been so affected by what you said, and we are going to at least do our part to help in any way we can on the journey that you're on. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you.